It was supposed to be an impenetrable fortress. Packed with Russia's best aerial defenses, Khalino Air Base was home to the Russian Air Force's 14th Guards Fighter Aviation Regiment. It was also close enough to Ukraine to allow Russia to carry out glide bomb campaigns. Russia needed this base to keep up the pressure on Ukraine's brave defenders. Now, it lies in ruins. It was the target of a brilliant missile strike that shows just how much smarter Ukraine's military tacticians are than those in Russia. The strike on Khalino wasn't just about missiles, it was a masterclass in using modern warfare tactics to destroy a key enemy position. Khalino is totally obliterated, and in this video we're going to explain what Ukraine did and how it pulled off the feat of destroying one of Russia's most important military sites. But first, a different question. Why did Khalino Air Base matter? Its position gives us a large part of the answer. Khalino is a little over 4 miles east of the city of Kursk, and it's part of the Kursk Oblast that Ukraine invaded in August 2024. That positioning also meant that the airbase was around 31 miles away from Ukraine's northern border, a close proximity of which Russia took full advantage. For much of the war, Russia used Khalino to batter northern Ukraine with its powerful glide bombs. The base, as mentioned earlier, was home to the 14th Guards Fighter Aviation Regiment, with that regiment having 24 Sukhoi Su-30SM fighter bombers at their disposal. Rather than using these Su-30SMs to enter Ukraine, Russia had them take off and fly over Khalino and the surrounding territory. From there, they would release their Fab glide bombs. These terrifying bombs are repurposed from the Soviet Union days, and they pack a massive explosive punch. Most are made using 1.5-ton Fab 1500 bombs, which each contain around 440 pounds of explosives. For comparison, a single Russian 152mm artillery shell packs around 14 pounds of explosives, so a Fab 1500 is roughly 31 times more powerful than an already devastating artillery shell. However, these bombs wouldn't be of much use to Russia alone. Ukraine's ability to counter Russia's fighter jets has led to the country practically avoiding flying over Ukrainian territory altogether. That would have stopped it from dropping its Fab 1500s were it not for a clever innovation: wings. Using special kits, Russia equipped its old Fabs with wings that allow them to glide for several dozen miles after being dropped from an Su-30. These glide kits typically cost between $20,000 and $30,000, with Russia's little innovation allowing it to take advantage of old munitions in ways against which Ukraine couldn't previously defend itself. And taking advantage is what Russia did. In March 2024 alone, it launched around 3,000 of its glide bombs, achieving a rate of nearly 100 per day. Not all came from Khalino, of course, but the base was one of the many Russia used to decimate Ukrainian targets from within the safety of its own territory. It's clear why Khalino is such a strategically important site for Russia. The base itself was home to just one 8,200-foot runway, though it also contained alert pads, facilities for storing fuel and ammunition, and command centers, and similar buildings for air and technical crews. This was a built-up and active airbase. Ukraine knew that. It had felt the force of the Fab 1500 glide bombs launched from Khalino, and it wanted to do whatever it could to minimize the impact the base could have in Russian President Vladimir Putin's special military operation. That's why it attacked Khalino several times before it launched its invasion of Kursk. In December 2022, it attempted a drone attack that left an oil reservoir near the base in flames. Footage published on X post-attack shows flames erupting in the wake of the strike, along with plumes of black smoke rising into the air the morning after. Another video clip shows Russian firefighters desperately trying to put out a rampant blaze, though with little success. It's believed that the strike also disrupted the airbase's command facilities and damaged some base support targets. It was a successful strike, but it wasn't anywhere near enough to take Khalino offline. Ukraine kept trying. Around 8 months later, Ukraine used its innovative cardboard unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, to attack Khalino again. These cheap and lightweight UAVs carry a small warhead along with large amounts of metal shrapnel. When the drone explodes, either intentionally or because it's been struck by Russia's aerial defenses, the metal shrapnel showers down onto the area directly below. The sharp metal pieces penetrate whatever they land on, including aircraft hulls, causing death or forcing long-winded repairs to damaged weapon systems. The attack is believed to have damaged several of the fighter bombers Russia was using to launch its glide bombs at Ukraine. The attack also appears to have killed several of the base's senior leaders as they inspected one of the downed Ukrainian drones. We can only speculate here, but it seems likely that the drone's warhead was triggered when the senior leaders came in range, catching them in a blast and showering them with razor-sharp shrapnel to terminate them. Pravda reports that these 2023 drone attacks killed the commander of the 14th Air Regiment stationed at Khalino, along with his deputy, some airfield workers, a handful of pilot officers, and a representative of Russia's FSB counterintelligence organization. Another small victory. One more attack took place on 31st of July 2024. This one involved a Neptune missile, Ukraine's self-made long-range missile that has a range of around 248 miles. That managed to destroy another ammunition depot in Khalino. So Ukraine was slowly chipping away at the Russian airbase. However, none of the strikes did enough damage to take it entirely out of commission, meaning the glide bomb assaults didn't stop coming. Russia responded to these attacks by improving Khalino's defenses. Following the 2023 drone attacks, Russia equipped Khalino with a pair of high-tech and extremely valuable weapon systems. The first was at least one S-400 to accompany the S-300s already installed at the base. Known as the SA-21 Growler to NATO, the S-400 is an aerial defense system that fires surface-to-air missiles, or SAMs, at its targets. The system has been in service since 2007 and is both ground-based and mobile enough to be transported via vehicles to different facilities. Its range is between 155 and about 248 miles, depending on the version used, with its warheads typically packed with about 315 pounds of high explosives that fragment upon impact with a target. The S-400 may also soon be loaded with 77 N6 missiles, designated as hit-to-kill weapons that Russia can use to simply shoot targets out of the skies. It's Russia's premier aerial defense system. The S-400 is supposedly capable of detecting stealth aircraft, along with being able to destroy incoming Tomahawk and precision-guided missiles. It's also capable of tackling multiple targets. The system can engage up to 36 aerial threats at once. That alone would be a solid defense. However, Russia reinforced its installation of an S-400 at Khalino by also installing a 64 N6 Tombstone at the airbase. Though the name may conjure up images of another dangerous weapon, the Tombstone is actually an advanced radar that Army recognition calls a cornerstone of Russia's aerial defense network. It's designed to detect and track incoming aerial threats, essentially working as a radar command center for the S-400 to ensure the SAM launcher is pointing in the right direction when it aims and fires. The Tombstone operates on the S-band frequency and produces 3D phased array radar images that allow Russian commanders to easily see up to 100 incoming targets simultaneously. Those targets can vary, as does the system's detection range. Cruise missiles and aircraft can be tracked up to a range of 186 miles. Tombstone can also track ballistic missiles incoming from distances of up to 621 miles. All of this adds up to a radar system that can detect incoming threats and send key information to the S-400 to fire long before a target reaches its location. It's also capable of detecting targets flying at high altitudes and high speed. Its radar ceiling is 88,582 feet, meaning it can easily detect most non-ballistic missiles and aircraft. Tombstone can also detect objects traveling up to 6,213 miles an hour, which is around Mach 8. At least those are the specs Russia wants the world to believe. But assuming those specifications are accurate, the Tombstone forms a lethal combination with the S-400. It tracks incoming threats no matter how fast or high they may be flying, relaying detailed radar images to command centers and the S-400 itself so that the SAM launchers can be far more accurate when firing. The Tombstone can also link up with Russia's older S-300 systems, meaning it would have been a valuable addition to Khalino even without the S-400. Think of the Tombstone as the eyes of Khalino's aerial defenses, with the S-400 and S-300s being the fists. And it's this combination that gave Khalino its reputation as being nearly impenetrable after the earlier Ukrainian strikes. And it got worse for Ukraine. With the Tombstone in place, Russia could start using its S-400s and S-300s to target Ukrainian civilian targets near the border. The anti-aircraft missiles intended to shoot down aerial targets were instead fired in ballistic missile trajectories. Combine those missiles with Russia's guided bombs, and you have a lot of explosives headed toward the likes of Sumy and potentially Kharkiv. The addition of the S-400 was a problem for Ukraine, but the Tombstone at Khalino made striking the base difficult but also mission critical if Ukraine was to relieve the pressure it felt on the northern front of Putin's special military operation. And in late November 2024, Ukraine somehow managed to pull off the impossible by obliterating the well-defended Khalino Air Base. The question is obvious: how did Ukraine manage it? The answer starts on November 18, 2024. When news started circulating that President Joe Biden had finally granted Ukraine approval to use American-made ATACMS weapons on Russian territory. That approval appears to have come with some caveats, the main one being that Ukraine should only use the missiles to support its defense of the territory it's taken in Russia's Kursk region. Still, this was a massive step. For the first time since the war began, Ukraine had access to reliable and battle-tested long-range missiles it could now use to strike into the heart of Russia. And it was a long time coming. The US had refused to allow the use of these missiles inside Russia for months, leading to Biden's policy turnaround, likely due to America wanting to avoid further escalation of the war by Putin. Bases like Khalino were obvious targets, ATACMS can travel for up to 190 miles before touching down on their targets, putting Khalino well within their range. Getting ATACMS permission was massive for Ukraine, but those missiles alone wouldn't have been enough for Ukraine to pull off the amazing strike it managed on November 25th. Those missiles still had to get past those powerful Russian defenses at Khalino. A Kyiv Post examination of the strike reveals how those defenses were laid out. A map of the base shows that its most built-up areas lay to its north. That's where Ukraine would find Khalino's weapons handling facilities, along with many of its aircraft, its runway house, and the technical and mechanical support systems needed to keep the base running. It's also where Khalino's revetments lie. Their barricades serve to support Khalino's anti-aircraft weapons, namely the S-300s and at least one S-400, and provide cover for its fighter jets. Those are the defenses that Ukraine would need to bypass if it were to stand any chance of striking the most valuable targets at the base. However, those northern weapons were also supported by principal defense and sensor complexes over a mile away in Khalino's east. It's here where the Tombstone likely sat, along with a pair of S-400 erection and launch vehicles. So there were some defenses to the east and some to the north, all working in tandem to defend the airbase's most valuable northern targets. As far as Russia was concerned, Khalino had a solid defense structure, and Russia was right. Ukraine would have to pull off something special if an ATACMS was to evade these defenses. Experience gained from the previous attacks on Khalino also taught Russia that Ukraine was most likely to attack from the south. That's why the Tombstone was set up to the east, perfectly placed to detect and intercept missiles and drones heading to the base from the south before they could reach their northern targets. There was only one problem. Ukraine had no intention of striking from the south. Instead, it was going to target the most important part of the entire Khalino defensive setup, the Tombstone that supported the base's entire radar network. Taking out the Tombstone would mean blinding the entire base. It wouldn't take the S-400s and S-300s offline. They could still fire, but without the Tombstone, they would have no way to detect their targets in the air. A lucky hit would be all they could manage once the ATACMS started flying. So how did Ukraine take out the Tombstone? The odds are that it dazzled it with a deceptive drone display. That's according to the Kyiv Post, which says Ukraine likely decided to hit Khalino from the north rather than the south, as it had in other attacks. Long-range strike drones were chosen for the job, with those drones likely being sent in large numbers and combined with several of the UAVs Ukraine has used already to great effect against Russia. Silent UAVs such as the Brownmore and Puma would have flown alongside faster strike platforms. Each drone would have had a well-calculated flight track to ensure that all of them converged on Khalino's north at the same time. From there, Ukraine began a phased wave attack. The slowest and quietest of the drones headed in first, drawing closer to the target area and within range of the Tombstone. Remember what we said earlier, Russia's radar system can track up to 100 targets at once. These slower drones were the first of those targets, and they were quickly followed by the faster UAVs Ukraine sent to the airbase. Each of these drones was a decoy. They existed to max out the Tombstone's tracking limits and absorb fire from S-300 and S-400s. The diversion would also have seen the drones taking varying paths, with some heading to the west while others headed out east. Again, confusion was the goal. With the drones spreading out, Russia's automated defenses naturally started trying to shoot them out of the sky. Next up, the strike drones. As the decoys drew fire, the strike UAVs circled and headed into Khalino from the east, precisely where the Tombstone was stationed. In addition to taking advantage of the decoy drones, these strike drones would also have used the base's topography to shield them from Tombstone and the S-400s until it was too late. Those strike drones engaged the Tombstone, taking it out before it had a chance to relay instructions to Russia's other aerial defense systems. That opened the door for Ukraine's ATACMS missiles. As this dazzling drone display was going on, and perhaps minutes before the strike drones took out the Tombstone, Ukraine would have launched its ATACMS toward the airbase. The ballistic missiles flew to an altitude of around 200,000 feet and arced their way toward the airbase. The Tombstone wouldn't be able to track them at that height, and by the time they started coming back down, Russia's radar network was completely trashed thanks to the strike drones. That left the S-400s and any other aerial defense systems Russia had at the base. Those systems were all linked to the Tombstone, meaning they were left firing blindly into the sky at the decoy drones. That worked out well. The remaining Ukrainian strike drones likely targeted the SAMs that the S-400s and S-300s were firing, creating a clearer path for the incoming ATACMS. Khalino was blind and practically defenseless, perfect prey for the ATACMS missiles approaching at about 2,300 miles per hour. As those missiles were about 200 feet above the base, they exploded, not because of any Russian hits, rather they exploded by design, with each scattering around 950 cluster bombs around the base. Those bomblets absolutely devastated Khalino, taking out many of its remaining weapon systems and essentially rendering the base useless. The aftermath tells the full story. On November 26th, Russia's defense ministry was forced to release a statement, as usual, tried to downplay Ukraine's success by saying that the strike had caused insignificant damage, while adding that 3 of Ukraine's 5 ATACMS got through to the base. It even shared pictures of what it claimed to be debris from the attack. Other footage and evidence from the base seemed to mock those claims. The New Voice of Ukraine published a photograph appearing to show several ATACMS striking down on their target. Footage shared on X and reported on by Forbes also appears to show a Russian service member filming the attack. The words, "It's exploding," precede what appears to be a cluster of ATACMS bomblets streaming across the ground. But it's the preliminary reports on the strike from Ukraine that reveal what is likely the true scale of the damage. Ukraine's military says the combined drone and ATACMS strike not only took out the Tombstone, but also destroyed at least 2 of Khalino's S-400 air defense systems. That means no more long-range strikes from Russia's SAM launchers. We conclude with a final question. What does this mean for Russia? Ukraine's strike on Khalino represents a strategic shift in the Ukraine war in several ways. The strike itself has damaged Russia's ability to launch its glide bombs into northern Ukraine, relieving pressure on that particular front. Taking out Khalino also means damaging infrastructure and disrupting supply lines that may have served the 50,000 Russian and North Korean troops currently trying to retake Kursk from the Ukrainian defenders. We also can't underestimate the psychological blow the Khalino strike wrought on Russia. If any confirmation was needed that Ukraine is allowed to use ATACMS in Russian territory, Khalino offered all the proof Russia required. It also showed Russia that Ukraine's tacticians know exactly what they're doing. They won't be firing ATACMS blindly. Every missile strike is coordinated and built using a strategy that ensures maximum damage. Forbes also notes that the hit on Khalino deprives Russia of a key frontline staging base for its drone attacks, as well as creating a gap in Russia's air defenses that Ukraine could exploit. Perhaps that might be enough for Ukraine to send F-16s into Kursk to support its embattled troops in the region. Time will tell. For now, Ukraine has just struck a powerful blow, both literally and symbolically, against Russia. With Khalino out of commission, Ukraine has shown once and for all why it's been calling for the US and other Western partners to allow it to use long-range missiles in Russia. It knows exactly what it's doing. But what do you think about the Khalino Air Base strike? Could Russia have done anything better to prevent the strike from happening? What impact will Ukraine having permission to use long-range missiles in Russia have on the war? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching the video.